Good morning. Good morning to our Bluefield State College staff, faculty, and our guests. It's great to have you. My name is Rebecca Hatch, and I am the BSC Cares, which stands for Bluefield State, Creating Awareness Regarding Suicide Project Director at Bluefield State College. September is a month that we focus on suicide awareness and prevention. May we charge you to think of every month, 365 days out of the year, to be aware of suicide awareness and prevention. Learn the signs and be vigilant to spot them and do the appropriate actions. This presentation is being live streamed, and all you have to do is go to the Bluefield State College webpage, click on the active link, and you're there. And Bluefield State College is availing this opportunity to you for one whole week, because I know you're going to want to go back and glean more information. We are so grateful to have this presentation and this event today. And if it wasn't for the SAMHSA Garrett Lee Smith Suicide Prevention Grant that is funding this, and the perseverance of Dr. Joanne Robinson, Vice President, Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, Dr. Julie Kalk, Interim Director of Research and Development Corporation, and our President, Dr. Marcia Krotzing, we wouldn't be here today. So I really want to thank them. Thank you. At this time, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas. As a psychologist, mental health advocate, family member, and survivor of her brother's suicide, Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas sees the issues of mental health promotion and suicide prevention from many perspectives. Winning several national and international awards for advocacy, she is dedicated to helping leaders and communities sustain a passion for living through innovative approaches to suicide prevention. In addition, she has held leadership positions with the American Association of Suicidology Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention and the International Association of Suicide Prevention. Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas has written 4 books on mental health and has presented to national and international audiences on the topics of leadership, resiliency, and suicide, including an invited address at the White House. On behalf of Dr. Krotzing, who couldn't be here due to circumstances beyond her control, it is my pleasure. Please join me in giving Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas a wild and wonderful West Virginia welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Imagine this. You take a deep breath and you put one foot boldly up on that high wire. It wiggles and wobbles a bit, and you feel a transitory catch in your breath before you leave the security of the platform and take another step. Whew, it's scary up here. What a wild ride, you think. People are looking up to me and I feel I'm up to the task, Man, my heart's beating, but I am focused and I am ready. And then that fear is quickly replaced with exhilaration when you look around and you see all these people cheering you on in your death-defying feat. You keep going one step and then another step and then another step. And then back on the podium, the voice yells out, "Hey, I'm super sorry to bother you, but I've been told that you must juggle these balls as well. So we're going to throw them at you and you just got to catch them." So you turn around and then you catch one ball and then another one and then another one. And you start feeling that tension in your gut. Maybe this is not what I signed up for. Maybe this is a little bit more than I can handle, but you power through one step and then another. And then your mind starts to chatter. I can't turn back now. Where is that safety net? Back on the podium again, this time with a little less remorse, the voice yells out, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but they told me you have to have this unicycle and these batons ablaze as well. Well, now, the sweat on your brow gives your inner state away. That once cheering audience has now become a dark, silent abyss. And you just wonder, are they just waiting for me to fall? Back on the podium again, this time, not even a word, just dangling a blindfold. I guess I got to deal with that too. Good morning. I know what you're thinking. Who is that middle-aged cheeseball woman, and what could she possibly have to tell me about mental resilience, mental health, and suicide prevention? I get it. First thing I'm going to tell you is embrace your cheesiness, okay? Embrace your cheesiness, embrace your quirky stuff. It's what makes you you, and don't ever be ashamed of it. And the next thing I want you to think about is whether or not you found yourself somewhere up on that high wire with me. Maybe you're on a big new adventure, and it is exhilarating, and you're excited about all the things coming at you, but it's a little scary. Or maybe you're in that middle part where you're facing some things that feel a little overwhelming, and you're just not quite sure that you're going to be able to handle it all. So you're having a little bit of self-doubt. Or maybe you're at the end, where you're feeling pretty betrayed, hopeless, and alone. Wherever you are, I'm hoping that somewhere along the way this morning that you might be able to gather a nugget or two to help you build your mental resilience, to help you find that strength to take you through and onto life's journey. Well, you heard a little bit about my formal bio this morning, but I want to tell you who the real girl is. First of all, get all the tribal issues out of the way. Here we go. I was born and raised in Connecticut. Not a New Englander. I'm not. I never knew that until I went out to Colorado to get a graduate degree and angels descended. Oh, and I realized that I'm a Westerner. I was really meant to be in Colorado. But I'm loving it here. It's absolutely beautiful, and I'm so, so grateful to be here. This is my husband. He and I are sitting on the Great Wall of China. I do get the unbelievable honor and privilege of doing this work internationally, which does a couple of things. One, it's very humbling to see how this issue shows up all around the globe. There is no part of our planet that has been spared from this issue. But more importantly, everybody's working on what I call a different quilt square. Everybody's working on a different part of the solution. And when we can knit all that together, we have a much more robust picture of what's possible for suicide prevention. This is me. I have a very strange habit of running long distances incredibly slowly. And I'm trying to do a marathon in all 50 states. In fact, I have a long run tomorrow morning, so if anyone would like to join me on an 18-mile run, I probably run as fast as you walk, so you could probably keep up, no problem. I'd love the company. I'm looking for a marathon here in your beautiful state, so if anyone knows of a race that I should join in, please let me know. All right, these are my three buddies. Nicholas is 19. How did that happen? I don't know. Tanner is 16, and my little buddy, Jacksonator, he turns 13 tomorrow. So I'm going to be cheering him on from over here, and we'll celebrate when I get home. So they're all dressed up because they accompany me in all kinds of mental health events. They come with me on the walks, they've heard me speak. They have grown up in a house where suicide prevention and mental health promotion is pretty much a daily topic. And in this picture, they're all dressed up because they're at a mental health gala with me. Anybody been to a gala? Those big stuffy parties where people raise money for fundraisers. It's really not a teenage boys' jam, but they come enthusiastically and willingly. I think it's because they know I'm going to buy all those silent auction items that they bid for. But they love it. And actually, they've become mental health advocates in their own way. How many of you were aware of or heard the Veterans 22-Day Push-Up Challenge from last year? Anybody do it? All right, a good chunk of you. So that was an interesting thing for me. I got challenged, I'm going to say beginning of August last summer, and in my field, we had a lot of controversy around that. It really made us think. You know, we bemoan all the time, nobody's talking about suicide prevention, nobody likes us, and all of a sudden, boom, like the world showed up for this thing. And people all over the world, even though 22 was kind of our data, everybody around the world was doing 22 push-ups for 22 days. It was pretty cool, except for the fact that we were very concerned about the messaging. Because we know, we being the suicide prevention field, that when you continuously pound, we call it pound the drum of death data, over and over again, you actually run the risk of increasing hopelessness. Okay, so this is the little balance that we need to learn about the difference between raising awareness and actually creating social change, is that we need to be careful. We need to create some urgency around this, as you'll hear me talk about in a second, but we can not only present the very hopeless and depressing death data. So the Veterans 22-Day Challenge was all about death data. It was 22 push-ups for 22 days to recognize the 20 to 22 veterans who were dying of suicide every day. So when a couple of us got challenged from our peers and friends and neighbors and stuff, many people in my field decided not to do it. Well, a few of us said, well, we're doing it, and here's why we're doing it, because the world showed up for a conversation that's really relevant to us, so let's get in there and shift the conversation to hope. So, in my madness, I did not 22 for 22 days. I did 30 push-ups for 30 days to acknowledge the 30 veterans and military folks that are rescued every day by our crisis line. And I'm about on day 4 or 5 when my middle son, Tanner, says, hey, are you going to challenge us or what? And I said, I had no idea that you'd want to do it. And of course, they all did. And so here's like my buff, very fit, athletic teenage sons doing push-ups with their old out-of-shape middle-aged mom, on video for the world. It was pretty cool. I was very proud of them. And so they're mental health advocates in their own way. All right, and then here, these are my 3 male pets, 2 male dogs, a male cat. Do the math. 3 male pets, 3 male children, male husband. My vote never wins on movie night, but I wouldn't have it any other way. All right, well, now that I've got you a little bit warmed up, I want to do some really important announcements, which is why I got my little cheat sheet up here. And I want to start off with a big thank you. I have never been so enthusiastically welcomed and greeted as I have been by Rebecca. Where are you, Rebecca Hatch? Did she step in here? She's back there. Would you please let her know? She is an amazing advocate for all of you. And if you can just tap into like 1/100th of her energy, you will be good to go for weeks. Just to capture a little scenario, like I traveled all day yesterday. I was in Portland speaking, 2 planes and all this stuff getting here. And I'm like dragging off the plane and blah, blah, blah. And like, here's Rebecca. And she's taking pictures like I'm some kind of celebrity, and woohoo, she's got a little sign up, welcome to West Virginia, Sally. It was adorable. So I am very, very grateful for her. And the larger BSC group, this CARES group, James, Robert, Trish, all of you leading the way here with the GLS grant. And I am very excited to announce, if you haven't heard already, that Brittany and Brandy down here have started a suicide awareness and prevention club, and you guys are going to change the world. You guys are awesome. So if you're interested, if you hadn't heard of it before, they're taking new members. They just started. Hopefully they'll be able to continue the momentum out of the gate. They've just gotten tons of response, like the time has come. I'm really proud of you guys. Keep it going, and I want to learn a lot more about what you're doing. Leadership here is also pretty phenomenal. I'm really bummed I didn't get to meet Dr. Marcia, or Dr. Joanne, or Dr. Kolk, but I'm sure that they've got this really as a priority for all of you, not another life to lose. And the reason why it matters here in West Virginia is because you're 14th highest in the nation for suicide risk. 14th highest state out of 50. You know, we got some work to do. I live in Colorado, and we're usually in the top 10, so I know what it means. And I know what it means for all of you, that the chances are good. The chances are very good that several of you in this room have been touched by this issue. About 340 West Virginians each year die of suicide, and 25 times that attempt. And for each death and attempt, there are hundreds of people that have been impacted. On average, for each death, about 125 people are impacted in a pretty significant way. About 40 of them where their lives are disrupted. So that means they can't focus in school, and their relationships have been impacted and so forth. So the chances are good. And I always like to pause at this point and say, whether you came in here because you've lost a loved one to suicide, maybe it was a friend, maybe it's a family member, a coworker, someone in your faith community. Maybe you're here because you've walked shoulder to shoulder with someone you care about who's fighting for their lives. Or maybe you have struggled with your own suicidal thoughts and behavior. Whatever the reason that brought you here today, thank you. Thank you for turning your dark day, your despair, your grief into energy and knowledge and passion to help other people. It is so important that you're here, and it is so important that you're learning what you're learning today, connecting with the resources here and in your community to make a difference and save lives. It's not going to be the mental health professionals that do it, not going to be people in my profession. Obviously, we can provide the treatment, but the person who's most likely to save your life is someone you already know. Someone you already know, someone you're connected with. And we're just going to hope that whatever starts here spreads so that more and more people will know how to have the conversation and know how to link people to care. All right, I mentioned it is National Suicide Prevention Week, which means there's a whole bunch of stuff going on around the country. World Suicide Prevention Day was on the 10th. So those of you who are thinking ahead for programming for next year, that's a really cool way to connect in with all kinds of folks around the world. I'm going to actually encourage you to pull out your phones. I'm going to do it more than once in this talk. Pull out your phones, and if you are connected to Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, if you could tweet a couple of things about what you're learning about, hearing about, feel free to take pictures of stuff. We are going to engage a much wider audience, okay? So the hashtag that everybody's using this week is NSPW, hashtag NSPW, National Suicide Prevention Week. And you'll get pulled into this national conversation we're having about suicide prevention. And I just want to track and see what you're saying. I want to see what's coming out for you. So my handle is S. Spencer Thomas. That's my Twitter handle, and Facebook is Dr. Sally Speaks. So get involved. And I think those are all my house cleaning, keeping notes. So I'm going to put down my little piece of paper. All right, let's get started. All right, so I'm talking today mostly about mental resiliency, mental fitness, mental wellness. And I gave Rebecca a number of topics to talk about. I have several different presentations that I do. And this presentation is primarily focused on what we call upstream suicide prevention. And let me walk you through an analogy so you get a better sense of what I'm talking about. All right, imagine, if you will, you are walking in a beautiful forest. It's just lovely, right? The birds are chirping, the sun is shining, and you're walking right next to this really nice river. And you look over and, oh no, oh my gosh, there's somebody drowning in the river. Well, you do not waste a second. You jump in the river, you pull the person out, you start performing CPR, they gurgle and spurt, and all of a sudden they come back to life. Oh, and you feel amazing. You just feel amazing. You just saved someone's life. Oh, yes, you. And then you look back at the river, and now there's 2 more people drowning in the river. What? Well, you can't save both of them, so you're yelling, help me, help me, help me. There's people drowning in the river. Now people are jumping in the river. It's chaotic. More people are coming downstream, drowning. There's people rescuing. There's people exhausted, burned out, frustrated, scared. Some of them are being saved, but not all of them. Some of them are falling through the cracks. A couple of people are trying to swim upstream to teach people how to tread water. It's a little late. Finally, you jump out of the river. You start running up the banks, and everybody down the river is like, where are you going? There are people drowning in this river. And you say, I'm going upstream to figure out who's pushing everybody in. That's the shift. Okay, downstream is just dealing with the crisis, and we got to. People drowning in the river demand our attention. But if our only focus is to rescue people in the white-hot crisis of suicide, we're going to miss people because we don't have the resources, we don't have the ability, the bandwidth to do that all the time. We need to get upstream from that. We need to be able to identify people early in the journey when they start feeling overwhelmed, when they start that beginning feeling of distress and despair, even before maybe they've had that first thought. When they're just stumbling into the tough parts of life, let's reach out and say, hey, are you okay? Let's talk. I have some ideas of things that might help. And even more upstream than that, and that's where I'm going today, how do we build resilience? How do we build this mental muscle that helps us bounce back when we hit those hard times? Now, people who are psychologically hardy work on this, okay? Just like other muscles, it's not like you can get up and be an Olympic athlete one morning. You gotta work on it. You gotta build your mental muscle up with different things, and I'm gonna go into that in just a second. People who are less psychologically hardy often resort to what I call, short-term dysfunctional coping. Right? The things that kind of boost our good feelings in the short run, but they kind of work against us in the long run. And you know what I'm talking about. Talking about alcohol misuse and spending that's out of control and sexual behavior that's out of control and all these things that for the minute we're in it, we're like, woohoo, I feel great. And then afterwards, we're like, damn. And we feel worse about ourselves, and they tend to cause more problems than we had before. So we don't want that kind of dysfunctional coping. We want you to build mental resilience. Because it turns out everybody runs into hard times. Every one of us. Every one of us will have a loss or a trauma or a break with mental health condition like depression, anxiety, substance use, and so forth. So when we get there, let's be prepared. All right? So I'm going to make that analogy again. It's just like other muscles. How do we keep our other muscles fit? We build strength, right? Many of us probably go to the gym and lift weights. We're building that strength. Well, with mental resilience, we're also going to build strength by being bold, by being courageous, okay, by stepping into our psychological fear and feeling it and being there anyway. Every time we do that, every time we face our fears in a very bold and courageous way, not in a reckless way, but in a bold and courageous way, the things that we're most scared of, we build that strength, okay? We also need endurance, which means we need some level of persistence, all right? We need to keep going, just like we would physical fitness. And then finally, flexibility. And flexibility around mental wellness is really about adaptation, adaptability. How can we change course, not get overwhelmed by some of the roadblocks that we hit, but just constantly problem solve, and work around it. Let me go into each of these. And we need all three. We can't just have one, we need all three. All right, so here's what it looks like when we just have strength. Okay, this is a pretty powerful image. This is from Baghdad a few years ago. This is a soldier from the 82nd Airborne Division, and a car bomb has just gone off like a block away. And you can see everybody's panicked, right? Everybody's running for their lives. And here's our giant, slowly and steadfastly moving towards the heart of the crisis, okay? Incredible courage, incredible strength, incredible bravery. How many of you noticed the little boy, okay? This is what we do in times of crisis. We find that strong, steadfast, courageous person, and we go, oh, please, tell us what to do. It's natural instinct. We're looking for that person. So thank goodness we have courageous people like this who are willing to kind of guide us through our crises. But let's fast forward 18 months, okay? Our soldier comes back to the United States, and he's trying really hard to reintegrate into civilian society. But he can't quite get the nightmares to shut off of all the things he's seen. And the people back home, well, they don't totally get him. They don't understand where he's been. They don't understand what he's thinking about. He just doesn't feel like he fits in anymore. But because strength is the only muscle that he worked on so hard, he white knuckles it through, day after day, having flashbacks and nightmares, feeling more and more disconnected. And finally, he succumbs to suicide because he just can't think of any other way to get around the problem. He feels incredibly hopeless. So we need more than just strength, okay? Strength is super important, and it'll get us really far, but we need more, all right? So here's what it looks like when we are talking about flexibility. Now, many of us were probably at some point conditioned to be perfect, right? Go out and show the world that you are a master, that you've got it all together, and don't let anybody show your weaknesses. In fact, if they ask you an interview about your weakness, you just turn it around and you say, my biggest weakness is that I care too much. My biggest weakness is that I work so hard. You turn that weakness into a strength because you don't want to show anybody that you are vulnerable. Well, it turns out that that's a fallacy too. In fact, our most vulnerable people sometimes are perceived by their peers as most strong. Isn't that interesting? There was a book that came out from Good to Great. It was a leadership book from a while ago. And they looked at what they called level 5 leaders. These were leaders who, this was mostly interested in corporate leadership. They followed these leaders that led large companies at the highest ranks of performance for a really long time. Okay, so it wasn't these like pop-up startup, woohoo, flash in the pan kinds of things. It was people who were able to sustain a high level of performance, of leadership over a long period of time. And they found that these leaders had something in common. And that thing they had in common was humility. They were all willing to say, you know what, I'm not perfect. I got a lot of flaws, and I need people around me to help us achieve our greatness because I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to disappoint you. So please, help us, help me, help you. We're all in this together. And it was that idea of that vulnerability piece that led people to have confidence because they could see the whole person. Unfortunately, most of us don't do that. Most of us walk around with these masks on that could stop hockey pucks, right? They're so out there like, I got it, I got it, I got it, I got it. Don't let anybody in. And when we hit those hard times, that breakup that just broke your heart, that F on an exam that you studied so hard for, your parents' divorce, grandparents' chronic illnesses, whatever it is, right? There's got to be something in your life, right? And it breaks through that mask. And now, oh my gosh, there's a crack. There's a crack in the mask. People are going to find out I'm wounded. And we do all this stuff to cover up the crack, silly putty, the Band-Aids, the makeup, whatever it is. We do all of these behaviors to prevent people to seeing how vulnerable we are. What if instead we showed people a little bit more about what's on the backside of our mask? Well, I used to work at a university. I worked at a small liberal arts Catholic university in Denver called Regis. And I had a group of students, just like you. We called it Choices. Choices was my group. And we used to put on mental health programs all the time. So one year during National Suicide Prevention Week, we thought we would do the mask exercise. And I fully give you permission to steal it because I stole it from another group. If this is what we do, it's all good, all good. Sharing good ideas is absolutely the way to go. We bought masks that look just like this. You can get them online, a little art thing. And we sat around, we had about 30 students together that day. And we said, okay, everybody, why don't you paint on the outside of your mask what you're really dealing with on the backside? The thing that you don't show, the thing that people don't know about you. Okay, and this is what they did. Pretty awesome stuff. A heck of a lot more interesting, wouldn't you say, than the mask of perfection that we present to everybody. This is one mask of grief that someone painted. This is a mask of transition that someone painted. Okay, so we all did this together, and then we sat in a circle, and everybody shared, this is what's going on for me. This is what this mask means to me. And then we put them up in the Student Center with a little anonymous narrative. This is what this mask is. This is what's really going on behind the mask of perfection. It was totally cool, and I really recommend. That's a great way. Arts in general are a great way to get conversations around mental health and suicide going. All right, so this is flexibility, how we need to be flexible and how we are showing ourselves to the world. All right, this is what endurance looks like when that's all we got. Come on, there we go. How many of you know the myth of Sisyphus, right? Pushing the rock, big rock up the hill only to have the rock come down again and again and again. All right, so I told you I pretend to be a marathoner, which usually means, I got 3 kids and this job and stuff. It usually means I'm on a treadmill most days at 4 o'clock in the morning doing long distance runs, which is the definition of insanity. And just in case you were wondering, running, and not getting anywhere, right? So that's what we do call, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result, you got to screw loose, right? You need to be thinking about other ways to do it. So endurance by itself is also not going to get you there. And when I'm working with college students, I always say, if this is what your life feels like every day, big boulder up the hill, I didn't get anywhere. Big boulder up the hill, I didn't get anywhere. If you're feeling like you're working so hard and you're not getting anywhere, ask yourself, perhaps you're pushing someone else's boulder up someone else's hill. At this stage of the game where you're here exploring your vocation, your calling, your skills, your passion, your flow, this should be easy. This should feel, not easy like, woohoo, that was just simple. It should just come naturally. You should be excited. And your energy should be so focused on it, it doesn't even feel like work at all. So if this is what it feels like to you, I just want you to dig some deep, deep, deep in there and ask yourself, is this my parents' hill? Is this my faculty member's hill? Is this somebody else's hill? What's my hill look like? Because when you get your hill, it doesn't feel like a hill anymore. It feels awesome. All right. Here's why. Here's why we're talking about this. 2 out of 5 college students report being so overwhelmed they are unable to focus on the work that they need to do. 2 out of 5. Do the math, right? A good chunk of this room right now is dealing with some kind of mental health condition, where it's depression, anxiety, trauma, an eating disorder, okay? They're so overwhelmed that they can't get to their work, all right? That's a lot of students, and more than half of students reporting having at least one episode of suicidal thinking at some point in their lives. You know what? Being in college is what we call a protective factor, which means if you're in college or you went to college, you are less likely to die of suicide than somebody who's never been to college. Why? A lot of reasons. You have connection here to other people, you have an ability to express your purpose, you have universal access to things like counseling services and so forth. Like, there's a lot of things here that can get you through a difficult time. And yet, half of you will have already experienced at least one episode of thinking of suicide before you leave here. All right, so let's do this. Let's turn our difficulties into a hero's journey. How many of you are familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero's Journey? All right, go look that up. Really cool stuff. Okay, it's really about turning our wounds and our trials and tribulations into our sources of power. Our sources of power. That every time we go through this, just like any other hero's journey that you've ever seen in movies or in television, that's us, right? We're doing the same thing. We're running up against those really big dragons and so forth. We're slashing them and so forth, right? Turn those into sources of power. Don't let them overrun you. And if you can just envision that, every time you're hit with a trial or tribulation, like, okay, here come the swords, here come the shields, here I go, I'm on a hero's journey, you're going to be far more resilient than if you go into the mindset of why me, always me, and that victim mindset that keeps us really stuck. Okay, this is a big one. For all of you students in here who are getting extra credit or here for a class, take notes right now. If you walk away with one thing during my whole talk this morning, this is the thing I want you to walk away with. All right? This is a model of suicide risk. And if you get and understand it, it's going to inform how you listen to people when they are talking about their despair. This model of suicide risk was developed by a man named Dr. Thomas Joyner. Now, Thomas is a prolific psychologist from Florida State University, which means he has pushed out literally hundreds and hundreds, probably upwards of 700 at this point, peer-reviewed journal articles on suicide and suicide prevention. He's written dozens of books. The book that I would encourage you all to read, whether or not you're in a class for psychology, is the book that kind of launched this whole model, and it's called Why People Die by Suicide. Why People Die by Suicide by Thomas Joyner, published by the Harvard Public Health Journal. And it is very easy to read. You'll get through it in a night or two, and it will transform how you think about the suicidal mind. All right, here we go. We're going to dive in. On this side of the Venn diagram, we have a desire for suicide, which seems like a no-brainer, right? You have to have a desire for suicide to be at risk for suicide. I should mention, when Thomas is a loss survivor. He lost his father to suicide when he was a graduate student on the beginning of his professional career. And in that moment, he made resolve to go to war against suicide. And his weapon was going to be science. So this young researcher went out there and he got his hands on everything he could find about suicide risks. And he came back with this huge stack of journal articles, and he said, did you know there are 200 known risk factors for suicide? Well, that's interesting, I guess, he said. It's not useful. It's not useful information because turns out we can't hold 200 things in our head when we're trying to have a conversation with somebody. Should I be worried about you or not? How many things do you get to hold in your head when you're under a lot of stress, which is what talking to someone who might be suicidal is? It's a very stressful situation. We get 3. That's it. 3 things we can hold in our head when we're under a lot of stress. It's why most really significant crisis protocols are 3 steps. Stop, drop, and roll, the ABCs of CPR. After 3, we're toast. We cannot remember it. We get all confused. We get them backwards and so forth. So lucky for us, when Thomas went out and did kind of his analysis of all these little factors, they clumped together in 3 ways. On the desire for suicide side, he said this is made up of really 2 things: thwarted burdensomeness and perceived belongingness. Now I'm going to boil those down. I want to make a nuanced comment about this comment, or this label, desire for suicide. What we really know is true for people who are living with suicidal thoughts is that most of them don't want to die. They just want the unbearable emotional pain to stop. They want the pain to stop. So if we're able to make them less miserable, the suicide thoughts tend to go away. Okay, so that's a really important distinction. So I'm going to argue with Thomas, and I do all the time. He's my buddy. He's actually an incredible mentor for me. That it's not so much the desire for suicide as it's the desire for the pain to stop. And these 2 things really fuel this desire. All right, burdensomeness, let's start there. Burdensomeness is the idea that my death is worth more to the people who love me than my life is. That I have become such a burden to other people that everybody will be better off when I'm not here. Now, this really turns conventional wisdom on its head, this idea that suicide is selfish. Thomas has quite a bit of research behind this conclusion that in the mind of the suicidal person, it's the ultimate act of selflessness. Okay, now this word perceived also matters because, like I said, with that facade, the fake mask thing, everybody might see this person that's got it all together. Maybe they have a great relationship, they've got all the trappings of success, maybe they look like they've got it all together, but behind that mask, that person might be feeling like a huge burden. And you can think about all the ways people can come to feel like a burden, right? Maybe there's a big mistake that they made. Maybe it's a financial mistake or a legal mistake. Maybe it's a relationship that fell apart and they're feeling defeated or humiliated. Maybe it's an illness or an injury or a mental health condition that they just feel like, nobody wants to put up with me anymore. It's just costing too much financially or costing too much emotionally. Okay, so listen for themes of being a burden. That's going to be a big cue. The other one is what he calls thwarted belongingness. You have to forgive Thomas. He's a researcher. He likes these really multisyllabic words. But thwarted belongingness is this. I used to belong. I used to be a part of something. I used to have a community. I used to have close people. I call them inner circle people. People who cared about me, I cared about them. We were part of the thing together. And then I lost it. Now I don't belong anymore. Okay, again, you can think about the many, many ways that people can lose those inner circle relationships. Death, divorce, moving, getting kicked out of school, losing a job, getting incarcerated, and so on. Okay, so these are all events that happen in people's lives that can be precipitants for suicidal thoughts and behavior. So you're going to be listening for, I used to belong and now I don't. I used to have these close people in my life and now I've lost them. And I feel like behind. But here's the good news. Big blue bubble. Little tiny pocket of increased risk, okay? Remember I told you half of college students by the time they're done with college have considered suicide? This is all you, right? Good thing is that while thoughts of suicide are coping strategies for when people are in overwhelming despair, most people don't die. Most people will live through that despair. A good chunk of them will actually be transformed by that overwhelming life experience. Remember the hero's journey thing? They will be transformed by it. They will make better decisions. They might stop using drugs. They might get out of domestic violence situations. They might go reach out for counseling and understand themselves better. They might make amends with an abusive father. I mean, all kinds of things can and re-understand their despair and turn it into a source of power and strength, okay? But we do have this group over here that's at risk, and we absolutely need to be supporting people who are in that despair. The people become more at risk when they have the other side of the Venn diagram, this thing that Tom has labeled acquired capacity for suicide. So if this is the I want to part of the equation, this is the I can part of the equation. Now there's 3 ways that people can develop this acquired capacity, or as Thomas calls it, fearlessness. Fearlessness for death. Good thing for us, suicide is scary. It is daunting. It is overwhelming. And for most of us, it's just not an option because it's just too darn scary. Thank goodness. For a subpopulation, they have fearlessness. They have risk-taking. And there's 3 ways that people get that. One is that they're born with it. Okay, I'm going to share a story of my brother in a little bit. But my brother's one of these people who just came into the world a risk taker. From the time he was a little itty bitty kid, he was always climbing to the top of the tallest trees. He was always wrecking his bike at the end of our cul-de-sac because he'd create these crazy jumps and he would just kind of go for it. It made him a great athlete. He was a 3-star varsity athlete in hockey, soccer, and lacrosse. When he made it out to Colorado, he would just put his skis down those double black diamond slopes and just go for it and look at me like a dork because I couldn't do it. It made him a great entrepreneur. In the middle of his 20s, he launched a national company in insurance. He was just full of like this risk-taking thing that most of us don't have. And when it came to his death, he wasn't afraid there either. Okay, so 1, you're born with it. 2, you learn it. Okay, maybe you weren't born with it, but you learn it by living through provocative and painful experiences. And again, thank goodness, right, we have people who've survived these painful and provocative things like a violent history, or a community that has a lot of violence, or an addiction, or a previous suicide attempt, or any number of things, a super big injury, any number of things, right? You live through it, and it's like when you get kicked off a horse and you get back on the horse. If you get back on that horse, you're less afraid. You're less afraid. You've lived through it. You've got it. Okay, so that's the second thing. You've learned some things about life and death. You're not quite so afraid because you've stared it in the face, right? So you're born with it, you learn it, and the third thing is you have access to and familiarity with lethal means. Access to and familiarity with lethal means. So put all those things together and you have acquired capacity. And again, Thomas turns conventional wisdom on its head. It's not our cowardly people that are most at risk for suicide. It's actually some of our most courageous, our most risk-taking, because when they get suicidal thoughts, they know what to do and they're not afraid. Okay, so let me just give you a couple of examples. One is our veterans, okay? We already talked about the veterans' risk. They're a perfect storm for this, right? When they are trying to reintegrate back into civilian society, the thing that they brought to the world, that the gifts that they have of being a warrior are not really fitting as well behind a desk, in civilian society, trying to fit back in. They had camaraderie with their unit. They had purpose. They knew what they were doing. They slated out of step, and acquired capacity is obvious, right? They're warriors because they're risk takers and fearless. They've had provocative and painful experiences, and they know how to use lethal means. Our LGBTQ teens also fit this. Very different population, also fit this for a T. If they're not feeling like they're living into the expectations that people have around them, they can feel very isolated, feeling like a burden, and the acquired capacity often comes from chronic bullying. Right? There are literally hundreds and hundreds of at-risk populations that fit this. And if this is risk, the opposite is prevention. So instead of people feeling like a burden, let's give people an opportunity to recalculate their purpose. What is the thing that they're here for? What is their purpose? If they're feeling isolated, how do we connect them in true social connections? And with acquired capacity, how do we get the lethal means, whether it's guns, pills, high places, out of the hands of people in that white-hot crisis moment? That is the most concrete thing that we can do that can often save people's lives. All right, so I'm going to go through my 4-step plan to build resilience, and I'm going to start with being bold. All right, here's a quote from Marianne Williamson, she's one of my favorites. And she says, feel the fear, do it anyway. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Fear is an interesting thing, right? It evolved from a time where we were being chased by saber-toothed tigers, and it gives us that flight and flight response that saves our lives when we're in physical danger. But our brain does not calculate these things when the saber-toothed tiger is our professor, or this love interest who's going to reject us, or standing up on a stage feeling like we're going to tip over because we're so scared. Our bodies react in the same way as if we were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So I ask you to be bold. When you feel that psychological fear kicking in, say, all right, is there a saber-toothed tiger here? No. It's my brain telling me to be afraid because there's something that my brain's telling me I'm going to get killed by something that really isn't going to kill me. And step into it and do it anyway. Now I'm going to share a little bit of a story here. And this is, what flag is this? Say it again. It's very much like Australia, but my little friends in New Zealand would be very upset because they're like sibling rivalry. It's New Zealand flag. What's New Zealand known for? Kiwis. What else? Cricket. Do I have a Lord of the Rings in the room? Any sheep? Yes, all of that. They're also known for being huge risk takers. They're like adventure junkies. And they developed this thing called zorbing. Anybody hear of zorbing? No, let me introduce you to the world of zorbing. Zorbing is you take this huge plastic bubble and you stick it up on top of a mountain and you put some warm water in the bottom. Students and I went to New Zealand for 2 weeks. Anybody want to be in my class? It was pretty awesome. Yeah, it was pretty fun. We saved up 2 years and did all this fundraising, and then we went. The week before we went on this, once in a lifetime trip, I found out that my university is eliminating my department, and I'm going to lose my job. Now, that was not my life plan. My life plan was to stay at this university forever. My kids were going to go there. That was it. So that was a pretty jarring thing to have happen. But I didn't tell my students because I didn't want it to ruin this thing that we had planned and worked so hard for. But at night, and when we were having these long bus rides in between the cities we were visiting, it was definitely on my mind. I didn't know how I was going to support my family. I didn't know what it meant. It felt like a big, huge failure. And I remember being curled up on the bus and just doing this thing that we call discernment, wondering, what does this all mean for me? And I had an epiphany, right? I had an insight that it was going to be okay. And just around that time, one of my students say, "Hey, Dr. Sally, let's go bungee jumping." And I was like, oh my God. And it's Mother's Day of no thing. And again, I'm away from my kids on Mother's Day, and I'm like, oh my God, if I die on bungee jumping day on Mother's Day, my kids will never forgive me. And all my students were like, you gotta do it. All right, so I caved into peer pressure. And this is what happened next. All right. Or not. Okay, AV people. Okay, PowerPoint help, not helpful, a little late. All right. We don't have sound, so that's no good. Angels. Okay, that is a moment of denial. Did you hear my students from the side? How you doing, Dr. Sally? And I'm like, I'm good. Right, we had just sent the first student. Got this, no problem. No, that was the facade mask going on inside my heart's beating like a wildcat. Good. Okay. Stop. Okay. So in that moment, these two guys are messing with my head. They're talking Kiwi slang to me, which I have no idea what they're saying. As they're putting the harness on my feet, I don't know, that's like the most important part of the deal. So I'm like, I really hope you're telling me this is a really nice harness, it's gonna be all good. But they're not, they're messing me. And this really masked the confusion that I had back at home. There was a lot of backstabbing and gossip and all kinds of stuff. All right, so what do people do when they're feeling stressed?
You're not talking to me.
They do a cute little penguin dance. That's what I see. Oh my gosh. And again, back at home, I realized like I'm about to be pushed off a cliff here, and I got no plan B about what I'm supposed to do, and it was a little bit terrifying. So again, what do we do when we're in these situations? Mug for the camera. And then we take a leap of faith, and then guess what happens? Okay, did you hear that little giggle? Do you know what happened? In front of my 14 students? Oh, I don't know, my shirt comes up over my head. I flashed my kids on Mother's Day. All right, so you get some unexpected giggles along the way. And then, I'm holding my shirt up. That's all I can think, like, oh my God. All the blood is in my head. It's crazy. And one more bounce. It's the flexibility part. Got it. All right, my ship comes in, okay? People come. All right. So that's the metaphor I want you to take away with. When you are facing those psychological fears, feel the fear and do it anyway. Trust your harness, right? All that preparation you have for that moment. Trust your guides, even when they're silly. Trust your guides, all those people who are surrounding you, saying, you got this, you got this. Take your leap of faith. It might not always work out, but you're going to learn a ton. And sometimes that boat's going to come in. 2 weeks after I got back from this New Zealand trip, I got a book contract that was awesome, and a couple months later I got my dream job, and then I've been on the upward horizon ever since. So it can happen. You just got to keep that persistence and take that leap of faith. Don't let your psychological fears hold you back. All right, number 2, belonging. Okay? It used to be thought that leadership models look like this. Everybody's in a row, the leader's yelling out, row, everybody's doing it. Yeah, that's not so much how it happens anymore. It much more often looks like this. White water. It is chaotic. Everybody's doing their part. We're just kind of adjusting as things go. And this is a quick story here. This is myself, my best friend from high school, and another friend and my husband going on this whitewater trip. It was our 30th birthday. It was a coming-of-age year. And she said, she flew out from California to visit me, and she said, let's go whitewater rafting. And I said, awesome. I'd been a ton of times before, but this time was different. We had had a massive snow in the spring, so the runoff was crazy. And we get there, and the guy in the back, DK's my hero. DK says, oh, guys, it's wild out there, so if you get bumped out of the boat, you know, put your feet down the river, don't sweat it, I'll come get you. I was like, check. Gotcha, DJ. I'm not getting out of that boat. So here we go, and I don't know, he had to shepherd this new hire, this girl, and I think she was probably stoned because she was just not doing well. And it's Colorado, you know. So we're following her, and all of a sudden, I don't know, she might have been texting or something. Her boat starts to flip up like this, and because we were following her so closely, we crash into her, 16 people in class 4 water. Then it gets really serious. I go down and it's like a washing machine, like you can't even tell which way is up, and then all of a sudden the river pops me up underneath the boat, and I think, I I didn't know heaven could be so dark. Boom, down I go again, churn. And I really think I'm going to die at that point. We had had a fatality a couple of weeks before of a faculty member, and I thought, that's it, I'm going to die. And then all of a sudden, I feel this tug on my life vest, and it's DK, and he can't quite get me on the upside down boat, so he says, Sally, put your fingers in this little tiny loop on the top of the boat. And I thought, DK, that is not going to stop me from getting flipped around in class 4 water, but I'm holding on to dear life. Finally, we get to more calm water. He pulls everybody up. It's all chaotic, oars and people are everywhere. We do a head count. There's 2 people missing, my husband and my friend. And it was probably just a matter of a minute or so, but it was one of those moments that seems to last a year. We're looking, and we finally see them on the shore. And so we go over, we take our boats, we go over there, and there's hugs and tears, and we're just a wreck. He flips the boat over. I kid you not. You cannot make this stuff up. There is a snake in the boat. A snake in the boat. And he says, well, didn't pay his $65, doesn't have his life vest on. Out you go, snake. And then he says to all of us, bad news. Like, there's no walking out of here. We're in a cavern. You got to get back in the boat. We got 4 more sets of class 4 rapids. And we're just, that trauma thing. We're just shaking. So we get back in the boat, and he says, the only way we're going to get through this is if you pull together. The only way you're going to get through this is if you pull together. And that's my other message for you. When you're in that white water rapids situation where everything seems topsy-turvy, pull your inner circle people in. Surround yourself with people who undyingly give you love and support. The people you surround yourself will determine how you get through that. And pull together, and you'll get through. All right, so our social connection is actually in jeopardy. Okay, that's my friend Melissa. Doesn't she look gorgeous? That's me. I'm terrified, which is kind of the whole story here. It's how Sally's terrified. Our social connection is in jeopardy. While it seems paradoxical that in 1 second I can reach back and find out what my 3rd grade classmate had for breakfast, our true social networks are falling apart. Places where we can truly be vulnerable don't exist as much as they used to. So we got to create them, and we've got to tend to them like a garden. We've got to make sure that our relationships are in good status, because when each of us falls, we need to know that we've got some arms to go into. All right, the second point really quickly, third point, is being well. Wellness is the reservoir of resilience. And when people hear wellness, they usually think of this, right? Physical wellness. People are taught how many hours to sleep, how many ounces of water to drink, how much exercise to do, how many fruits and vegetables to eat. All of that is good. All of that's good stuff. But it's only 1/4 of the pie. Total wellness is about mental wellness. And by this I mean, how do we keep ourselves sharp? Not just studying to cram for the exam, but how we are constantly learning, constantly stretching ourselves, our ability to do things, trying on new things, new languages, new skills, and so forth, keeping that brain firing. How do we have social and emotional wellness? There's this whole thing called emotional intelligence, where we can learn how to regulate our own emotions and how to regulate our interactions with other people. Okay, how do we keep up those true social networks? And then finally, spiritual wellness is also an equal part of the pie. And by that, I mean, how do we engage with things that are bigger than ourselves? Whether that's in our faith community, maybe it's with nature or art, maybe it's in volunteering or some kind of social justice thing. Constantly waking up to the fact that there's a whole world out here and we are just one little part of it, and we have a duty to contribute to that. Okay, when we have all that together, we have profound wellness. All right, my last point, and then I'll close. Who's this? Wow, you guys are super smart. Yes, most people don't get it until I go here. Yes, J.K. Rowling, right? How many of you knew that when she was a young mother on welfare, sitting in a bar, drawing images of wizards on cocktail napkins, she seriously considered suicide? You never know what's on the other side of your distress. You never know. You can turn those sources of despair into power and transform your life. Okay, many, many people. Sir Isaac Newton. I mean, I guess I would become a little bit confused too if apples were falling on my head and I didn't know why. Marie Curie, she also is best known for having 2 Nobel Prizes in science, but most people don't know that she also had profound depression after her mother died and was hospitalized. Winston Churchill, we now would say would live with bipolar condition. He called his depression his black dog. Terry Bradshaw, Man of Steel, said he almost worked himself to death. He had an addiction to just never, ever, ever achieving a goal. He was constantly striving. And even Mike Wallace, who's well known for his anchoring 60 Minutes, he said, at first I couldn't eat and then I couldn't sleep. I became hopeless and lost all perspective. You just get crazy sometimes. I had done a piece on depression for 60 Minutes. I just didn't know that that's what I was going through. And finally, I just collapsed and went to bed. They all came through it. These are all images of people we have lost to suicide. And so I want to just go back to that point that if you're just looking at that facade, you're probably not going to know. You need to spend time with people and understand what they're going through and hold the space of their pain by having empathic and compassionate conversations. And you also need to be unafraid to ask a direct question. Are you thinking of suicide? People have fears like, oh God, what if I put that idea in someone's head? You won't. Remember, half of college students have already considered it. You won't put the idea in someone's head. You will create profound connection if you come to it with compassion and, most importantly, connection to resources. I'm with you. For all of you in the room who've lost loved ones to suicide, this is my brother Carson. He was a 34-year-old business leader in Colorado, father of 2. He lived with bipolar condition, and it turned out to be fatal. And a couple days before he died, we had a conversation, and I said, Carson, we got this. We're going to figure it out together. I knew he was in trouble. He had been pretty manic and then pretty despondent. I said, well, we'll get through this. There's other people, other people just like you who figured out it. We'll do this. There's hope, there's hope, there's hope. And he said to me, you know what, Sally? It's madness. And less than a week later, he took his life. Now, I don't know what he's trying to tell me exactly because he's not here, but I have a pretty good idea. My brother was a very determined and persevering man who got through all kinds of things. So I believe in my heart of hearts that he would have persisted to find something else that would help him through this really difficult, painful mental health condition. But I believe my brother lost hope. Not that he couldn't get well again, but that he couldn't get his life back again. And that makes me so angry. It makes me so angry that people who are fighting for their lives with treatable health conditions like depression, bipolar condition, addictions, and so forth, have also got to go through all of this social discrimination, prejudice, misinformation, and myths that keep people from accessing or fully acknowledging the care that's out there. So that's why we're here today. All of you have a role and responsibility for changing that conversation, for letting people who know that are struggling, it's okay to reach out for help. And I'm here for you, and I will persist with you until we figure it out. All right, so in closing, I thought about going back to my opening. Who gets up on the high wire and is cool about it? The birds. The birds got it, right? So maybe we could learn a few lessons from the birds. All right, this guy, he's being bold. He's standing up for his rights. Yeah, we can do that. Other boldness we sometimes see in birds of paradise, right? Over evolution time, they get more and more bold in their presentation. Can I go over for 2 minutes? Okay, I'm going to show this video because it's going to make your day, and I really want to end on a positive note. So let's take a moment and imagine what it would be like if we were being bold.
Hot nights, colored lights, soft hips and your painted lips. You gave me one look and I was hooked. 'Cause some loving song, you turned me on, you set me free. There ain't no place I would rather be. And now it's time you should be mine. Yeah, some loving song. I feel so free. 'Cause I'm a loving song.
Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at
Baby,
me.
let me show you how to do na-na-na. Girl, we could go na-na-na. If you wanna go, we could do na-na-na. Just let me take
I'm
you
outta here.
home.
It's
We
like,
could
I'm all
try
that.
na-na-na. Baby, let me show you how to do na-na-na.
All right. Yay, birds. All right, every morning I want you to wake up like that, bold and ready for your day. All right, the geese, we know, they look out for each other, they're connected to each other, you know, they honk and encourage each other. If one of them goes down for an illness or an injury, another one will go down until that one either dies or gets better, and then they find another flock. Think about the geese, and then here's your little R&R. Let's love like the penguins, unconditionally, undyingly love and connect with people. Let's do our little workout like the penguin. And then this, I want you to imagine just for a second that you have, I just want you to imagine in your mind that you have this incredible feather, all right? And now, what I want you to do is imagine rubbing the feather the wrong way. I know it's kind of hard. You just had a beautiful idea in your head and I just ruined it. But I want you to rub it the wrong way. And what happens? All those little spindles, right, they break, and that's what trauma does to us. That's what mental health conditions do to us. They rub our feather the wrong way. But you know what? If you pull that feather back together, it's even more interesting than it was before. So your homework is to go find a feather. And I want you to put it in a place that you see every day, a feather that speaks to you. And when you see that feather, I want you to remember to be bold, to be long, to be well, and to believe. All right, so we're up on the high wire once more. But this time, we're birds, so it's cool. And here comes that voice from the platform again. Hey, 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 I've got some plates for you to spin. And you turn around and you're like, nope, I'm not spinning your plates. My plates are full. Instead, I'm going to go out and soar on a journey of a lifetime. Thank you. So I went over for just a little bit. I'm happy to stay afterwards and talk to folks. I know some of you got to get to class and other things. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks again to Rebecca and your team. Awesome. So glad to be here. And thank you all for making this a priority in your day.